Hi everybody, and welcome to my first of two videos on this, the Nikon FE2. This is an interchangeable lens, 35mm SLR, and what that means, the lenses can be swapped mid-roll with other lenses. It has a single lens, just one, a reflex mirror, and the viewfinder the user sees through the viewfinder what the lens sees and what the film will see. It has a standard center-weighted meter, shutter speeds from 8 seconds to 1/4000th of a second in both manual and automatic. In automatic, the difference is that in manual you can select any one of these numbers. In automatic mode, the camera will select any shutter speed. If it needs something that's 1/567th of a second, it can do that in automatic mode. The viewfinder has 0.86x magnification with 93% frame coverage. It came with a standard K2 focusing screen, but there were two other options which are user changeable. And the flash sync on this camera is 1/250th of a second, that red mark right there. Also, coincidentally, the camera's manual shutter speed is 1/250th of a second. The Nikon FE2 was a mid-range camera, a mid-range electronic level camera. At the time that Nikon released these, it had three tiers: entry, mid-range, and professional. And then mid-range were broken into mechanical like the FM2 and electronic like the FE2. It has a lot of high-end features like changeable focusing screens and a fast maximum shutter and a fast flash sync, which made this a very good professional backup body. It was made by Nikon, then Nippon Kogaku KK, in Japan from 1983 to 1987. It was preceded by the FE, concurrent with the F301, 801, 501, FM2, FA, FG20, FG, F3, and F4, and followed by the F601, which was called the N6006 in the US officially. Though honestly, the F801, which is the N8008 in the US, has more features in common with the FE2 than the F601 does. So if you have your Nikon FE2, let's get into what some of the features are. Starting on the top, though technically these are on the sides, we have the strap lugs, and this is what you would connect your strap to. Here we have the ISO selection dial and the aperture, or the shutter, the exposure value compensation dial. They're in one, but they work differently. Here we have the film rewind knob and lever, and the film rewind knob also opens up the camera back. It is the camera back opening lever. Good, no film in it this time. And then the film back lock release. Then we have the exposure compensation lock right here, flash hot shoe, shutter speed and mode selection dial, film advance lever, double exposure lever, frame count window, and shutter speed button, or shutter actuation button right there. Here we are on the camera's front, and we have the self timer right here, the depth of field preview button right here, the shutter release, the lens release right here, the lens meter coupling connection right here, and then the lens mount itself. Over here we have the flash PC port underneath that little rubber cap. There you go, you can see. On the camera's back, we have the serial number up here, the viewfinder window, the camera back itself, and then a memo pad so that you can tear the top of the film box off and put it in here to be reminded about what type of film you're using. On the camera's bottom, you can see the film drive mechanical coupling, the film release button, the battery chamber, the tripod bushing, and the film drive electronic contacts, and the previous owner's name, Wade Wilson. Thank you, Wade, for taking such good care of this camera. On the camera's inside, we can see the film cassette chamber, film guide pin, film guide rails, and what these do is the film guide pin helps the film to come out of the cassette smoothly. The top and bottom rails keep the film from shifting up and down as it travels through the camera, and the inner rails sandwich up the film between the rails and the pressure plate to keep it flat so that the emulsion's in the correct place for the light to focus. Here we have the film take-up sprocket, and what this does is help the film to advance smoothly through the camera as it's moved. Film take-up spool right here. This is where the film is wound to as it moves through the camera. And then these two little pins are data back connection pins. I don't have a data back to show you that with. Then here's the film pressure plate on the film back and a little spring that helps keep the cassette in place when the film back is closed. The Nikon FE2 is one of the most popular and sought out Nikon camera models. It remains more popular than most any other Nikon available on the market, and with a lot of good reasons. It's really easy to use. It's a fantastic camera with good functionality, a great maximum shutter speed, a great flash sync, and endless mechanical reliability. It holds up well today. The meters are good and the build quality is still really good. The one weakness that these cameras have is in the shutter, which can sometimes self-bind and ruin the curtain leaves, and that's happened to me on the 2 of the 3 previous FE2s that I bought to this one. And that happens despite the shutter leaves being titanium, and the problem is when that goes, if the shutter leaves can't be just put back in place, which because they're titanium, they bend, and that's an issue. The whole shutter mechanism has to be replaced, and that is a pretty spendy repair. So now that said, the shutter in this is a very advanced component with a 3.3 millisecond travel time. That's incredibly fast, especially for the time that this camera was released. Basically though, this camera is just an FE with a handful of upgraded specifications: the shutter speed, flash sync, TTL flash control, and a few others. One of the big things about the TTL flash control on this is it uses off-the-film metering, which is a big step up from the FE. These also have somewhat more reliable electronics than the FE. I have yet to actually get an FE. I've had a half dozen of them in my hands, none of which work because the electronics have all been shot. I've never had an FE2 with electronics problems. These are also compatible with a great range of lenses, though not the older NAI lenses or the modern G lenses. And they don't hold, one other thing is when you use this camera, don't hold the DOF preview lever like this or rest your finger between it and the camera body during exposure. Okay, so basically here's the DOF preview lever. And there's a big issue with these cameras where you don't want to hold it like this when you take a picture, and you don't want to wedge your finger underneath it. I can't do that, but if you could, you don't want to do that, because what can happen is that can cause the camera to go into stop-down metering mode and throw off your exposures. It could also damage some of the mechanisms in here. There is one way to tell on these cameras that the electronics are starting to fail, and what you'll look for is the light meter being jittery during meter readings. And that's not like a normal meter needle will do this or adjust as you adjust things, but if your needle is doing this as you're taking meter readings or making adjustments, what that's telling you is that your electronics are starting to go, and that it's time to get a new FE2 or to get the electronics on it replaced. So there are a couple things not to do with this camera. First is do not touch the shutter. It's a good way to ruin them, as I've seen before. Don't touch the mirror. Your finger oils can tarnish it and cause focusing to be impaired or your viewfinder to be darker. Don't leave your camera and lenses in the car. In the heat of the summer, the oils can get onto the aperture blades or into mechanical components where they shouldn't be and cause things not to work properly. In the winter, the lubricating oils can get thick and gummy and then break down, causing them not to lubricate properly. Don't leave these in your camera gear in a plastic bag or box unless you have a very good and rechargeable desiccant pack, because being stored in a plastic container where moisture will infiltrate can cause fungus to grow on your lenses or in your camera. Also, don't leave batteries in your camera. That's a really good way for them to leak and ruin your electronic components. Before you put your camera into storage for any period of time, you'll want to make sure that you activate the shutter, and you do that to take the tension off of the springs so that the springs don't get stretched out and ruined in storage. If the springs and mechanisms get stretched from being left in a permanently cocked position, that can cause the camera's timing to be off. Don't let your camera get wet. It has electronic components which would be ruined by exposure to water. And one last thing, just remember that your camera is a precision tool and should be handled with care and respect. If this video was helpful, please leave me a thumbs up. That lets me know I'm on the right track and making content which is useful to you. If you have comments or suggestions, please leave those below. I'm pretty good about responding quickly. If you if you are an amateur photographer who has taken photos with a Nikon FE2, feel free to put a link to those in the video description. And if you'd like to subscribe to find out when I have more videos, by all means, please do. And one last thing, thank you guys for watching, and take great photos.